So this will be probably a quicker stream talking about some Lightroom editing techniques that I look at when doing some portraits, some nature photography. This is the last stream before I get my new mic. I've ordered a new mic, a Yeti, the newer Yeti mic. Definitely help when I'm streaming here at the studio. It's just the ceilings are open, so there's so much sound. It's pretty annoying. But I love the studio no matter what. Love my gallery up behind me, and it helps to be here on location to do these kind of things. So I'm gonna go through some. Um, I'm gonna go through some nature stuff that I got down in Florida recently on Sanibel Island. A couple shots I got in Grand Haven, the lighthouse. It was actually a really cool scene. There was a like a fog. I don't even know how to explain it. There was a storm the night before when we were camping on Grand Haven State Park, and then the next morning, and pretty much most of the day, probably till like 6, 7 o'clock at night, it was just complete fog. It was pretty crazy. I haven't seen it. Now, granted, I don't live on the west side of the state, and I don't frequent that area too much, so it could be something that is there normally, or not normally, that can happen. It did make for some interesting, moody shots of the water, Lake Michigan, and the lighthouse, the inner lighthouse as well. Uh, I did get some clean shots of the lighthouse without the fog, which it's kind of cool to see the two different, looks with how weather can completely change your shots. And again, I did not know it was coming. I didn't know it was going to happen. So it made for a cool surprise. And it's funny because when I was getting those shots, I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. A lighthouse with a fog, it looks awesome. And then you bring it back and you go between the two, the blue skies and the fog, and it really shows you how important weather and light can be, but also you can't predict it. So like I've said many times, you just kind of have to deal with the situations that you're given, right? Especially if you can't plan out your trips and you don't have the time to look at the weather and work around it. The one thing I will tell you, and I'll get into it when I get the picture, is I prefer to have shots with like these landscape shots with no people, and that was a pretty big issue at Grand Haven just because there's so many people. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just I prefer clean, no people shots. With that said, I was able to crop out the people. I did do a couple shots, and we'll look at them, that had people in it, and I don't like it. And I know that it's hard in those situations. I don't expect people not to be there, but I do like clean shots, and I think that's just because I'm more of a nature landscape kind of guy, and most of the time, I don't have to deal with people. Now, with that said, I remember when we went to Zion National Park and we're in the Narrows, I'm like, man, I really wish these people weren't in my way so I could get a nice, beautiful, clean shot with no people. But it's like I don't own the park, so I have to deal with it. And yeah, you could go in and you could do Photoshop and get rid of those people, but as if you know me, you know that I don't like to do too much post processing, except for exposure stuff, contrast stuff, simple edits. Sorry, I'm bubbly, not sponsored by bubbly, but I need a drink. So, anyways, let's pull up. I apologize because I'm trying to set up my stream to make this a little more streamlined. Streamline, huh? There we go. So you should see my whole stream because I'm editing I'm streaming from my laptop here at the studio, so I have limited screens at this moment. All right, so let's get into Lightroom. I use Lightroom 98% of the time for my edits, and that's not to say that if you use another program or you use Photoshop more, that you're doing it wrong, right? Lightroom, Photoshop, other editing programs, all do very similar things. I just prefer sticking with Adobe. Their Photoshop Lightroom monthly fee is like $9.99 a month, and so what you get for $10 a month is pretty incredible. And I know some people don't like the monthly leasing fee. I actually don't mind it because I can cancel anytime. I also get the latest and greatest versions of the app with fixes and new features. So I really enjoy it. And I think it's completely worth the money. I mean, look, in $10, and if you're a photographer, in the grand schemes of what you're spending money on, $10 a month is nothing. And for what you get at your fingertips is incredible. So we're going to go through some of this stuff. So I did some portrait work for my nephew. We can go through some of those. And this is what I like about, excuse the phone. This is what I like about Lightroom is the catalog system. I'm a little sloppy right now. I need to go through and re-export some catalogs and save some new ones because they're kind of all over the place right now. But for example, I have a real estate one, so I can go back and forth. So not every category is cluttered with all these photos. I can really organize them how I'd like to. So you can see here's some of the raws, couple processed images. We'll go through it all, but you can see it's super easy. I run through a SSD external hard drive, so try to keep it quick and off my computer. Lots of photos of the ocean. So we'll go through here and I'll let everybody know how we did it. So let's start with nature. I'm not going to go to the portraits yet because I'd prefer to start with the nature shots. So here was Grand Haven, and this is Lake Michigan, and you can see that there was zero visibility whatsoever. I mean, there was none at all. Go through. All these were pretty similar. I did like this shot. This bird randomly came in, and I preferred this shot over just nothing in it. Even though this one's nice, I like having the bird in it, the seagull. And again, so here's basically the same shot, but I'm going to show you a little bit of the post-processing that I've done on this. So we'll go into develop mode. And here we are. So you can see my ISO was at 100. I was at about a 20 millimeter range. I was on my 16 to 35, which is what's recording me right now. And yeah, I just, I cropped some stuff out. There was some people on each side, so I didn't want to Photoshop them out. So I punched into about 20, but still plenty of wide. And you can see here, I mean, nothing crazy. This is a raw right before, and this is the raw after, but it's also post-processed. So in this case, I did straightened my angle a little bit. I was a little off. I find, hey Yazi, I find that with the wide angle, the 16, it can be difficult at times unless you have your level on in the camera to truly get that horizon. But at the end of the day, in post, it doesn't, because you can just fix it in post. It's not that big of a deal. It's the same thing with white balance. I mean, I would always tell you to shoot manual and an auto white balance, and then in post you can go through and you can make it look however you want. So again, I here have so on the left side of Lightroom, there are all these awesome presets in here that you can play with. If you, it's not to be lazy, right? These are just here to help you. Sometimes they could just be what you use or a base for what you want to use. And these are really nice, and there's nothing wrong with just going with these and then tweaking as you go. Now you can make presets. Like I have a homes one where I'm doing real estate photography, so I have a preset. So when I'm on a home, I can click that and then go in and do individual tweaks. I have a one that I called Wow, just because when I did it, I was like, wow, that looks really cool. Pretty simple. Named it Wow. It's got a little bit of a purple hue to it, and which I can change once I get the base. It's got, you can see the clarity is pumped. I think normally the clarity is at 50, but you can see once you get, like I said, a preset on there, you can tweak as you go, which is really nice. And again, all these are presets, and you can see, you can everything from vignettes to, they've added these the optics here, lens correction, so you don't have to go all the way down here and do anything on this side. You can do it all from here. You can sharpen. I prefer to do the optics and the sharpening on this side of the panel. And grain, I can tell you I've never added grain. There might be some times artistically that you want to do something like that, but I can tell you I've never added grain. But that's not to say you can't. Curve. This is going into the S curve, which you can get over here. Whoops, sorry. Here's your curve. You can do either way. These are just, 4 simple ones, presets that you can base off of, or you can just go with it. Like I like lift shadows a lot. I use this quite a bit, to be honest with you. Gives it a little bit of a filmy kind of look, which is pretty cool. I find sometimes a lot of my shots have a lot of contrast and a lot of which tend to make them darker, right? I know there's a lot of background noise, I'm sorry. So sometimes my lift shadows can make it a little more moody, and as my wife has told me, a lot of my shots are moody, and there's obviously nothing wrong with that, but I don't want to make everything contrasty and dark all the time. So not to get too off track, but you can see all these, they got all these black and white versions here. They got all these creative versions. There's some really cool ones here. Like I just used, I'll show you, I used this turquoise and red on my lighthouse shots. I just thought it looked really cool with how it punched the reds. Yeah. I don't really like aged photo too much. And I don't use vintage that much just because I think, especially the age, just kind of pushes it a little too much. And I didn't like that at all. These are good. The color presets, vivid. Again, these are good. These are good to get you, if you're unfamiliar with making some adjustments, or you just want to do a quick test. Like, what does it look like with high contrast? Or what does it look like when I push the vibrance up? Instead of going in and individually having to do them, you can just do this and just get just a quick look here. We'll go to one that hasn't been edited, right? So this is nothing. This is clean, nothing to do. You can just go, oh, okay. You can see what it does with the different settings, and then you can go. So if I want a high contrast, I can see the adjustments it's made, clarity, contrast, and within that preset, I can bring things back, I can move things around. I can do really whatever I want to that preset. So anyways, let's go back to this one. I'll show you some of the adjustments I made. So you can see my vibrance is up, saturation is up. So the key thing, Yazy, I would tell you that I like Lightroom for its simplicity, its cataloging, and my edits, for the most part, 95% of the time, are basic exposure and, contrast and texture and stuff like that. There's a lot within Lightroom that you can do without having to go to Photoshop. Now, with that said, there are times, like let me go into this shot. Sorry, it's a little loud. Where I do use Photoshop, and that's why that $9.99, that $10 a month photography plan with Lightroom and Photoshop are so key, because you have both at your fingertips, and it just depends on what you're doing. Like, Photoshop is so powerful and so good to use, but I find when I'm just doing these simple edits like I just showed you, I don't need to bring it in Photoshop. I don't need all those bells and whistles. The key to my statement is I can do all of these. It's a little loud. I can do all of these adjustments. 1 second. They're doing some, I don't know what they're doing out there. I can do all, I'm just going to go. I can do all of these local adjustments right here. See, I can do whatever I want here, right? I don't even know, did I do any gradients? I don't think I did any spot brushes or anything in here, which I can do, and I'll show you how to do that. But on this one right here, like, I mean, this is a really cool shot, right? I just bumped up the clarity, the vibrance, and the saturation, and I did some masking of some detail. I did some noise reduction, and I did my chromatic abrasion and profile connectors. But what I'm telling you is I can right-click this, and I can go to Edit In, and this will pull this photo up in Photoshop for me to, and I'll show you. Click on that, and it'll load it up. So I can do all those adjustments, and I'm going to get that photo in Photoshop with those Lightroom edits that I've done, which is great, right? Cool. Yeah, I mean, I ordered a new mic. I'm supposed to go pick it up. I'd like something that I can get a little better quality. Thank you for the feedback. But you can see it pops right up. I'm running off the laptop, so it's a little slower. But this is why having that program, or having that photography plan, is so nice, because you can do a lot of your basic edits in Lightroom, and then if you have anything that you need to do that requires any masking or layers, or if you really need to do some spot removals that are a little more in depth, Photoshop has better tools to do that. Lightroom does a really good job with it, but it's a very I think it's going to load all my ones that I was working on the other day. So, like, I can spot removal right here with this brush, and you can see I did. There was like a spot right here. Here, let me. This is another key thing. See these little boxes? You can turn it off to see what you've done and what you haven't done. So you see there was like a piece of paper here, and I didn't want it there. And it was simple. There's not much texture to it to match. So just did a little bit of spot removal, and you can see it's completely gone. And you would have no idea that it was there at all, right? So you can see, if I don't want this here, I could just do that, and it's gone. Now, there's sometimes that it's dumb, and it could misread it, and it could have this thing here, the auto, and you're like, but all you have to do is just grab it and just move it to a spot that looks similar. So that's a simple way of doing it, right? And that's if it's very subtle and you don't have anything too hard to remove. Now, Photoshop, on the other hand, has, and this is, okay, here it is. So you can see it's the exact picture that I just had. We're working with the raw file, and now I can work. Let's say this is all I wanted to do that. I'm like, okay, I got everything I needed done in Lightroom that I wanted, but man, I don't want that bird there now. Okay? I could do that in Lightroom. I could take him and I could go I could go like this. Whoop, whoop. And I could get rid of him, maybe even his shadow just in case. And let's see what the auto does. So it's done. Now, can you tell that that bird was there? I can't tell. Depending on the texture of the water, though, sometimes you can tell whether or not you removed it through this option. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So let's say I have a spot where it's like, man, I need to get rid of this bird, but the spot removal on Lightroom isn't smart enough to match this stuff, okay? So if I go into Photoshop here, and again, I'm going to let you guys know right now, I don't use Photoshop a ton. There's a lot that I still need to learn with this program, which it's like, wow, a photographer doesn't know how to use Photoshop? Well, I'll be honest with you, I am learning every day with this thing, and it's mostly because I haven't ever had to use it or a need to use it. But the more you use it, the more things you learn and everything. So, but I want to tell you is, so this bird right here, I'm going to zoom in, Control plus, and I'm going to come over here to this bird, and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So you can go over here to your healing brush, and these are usually the ones that I use, the spot healing and the healing brush tool. So let's go to spot healing, and up here, if you have your brush size, if the easiest way to do the how big your brush is the brackets on your next to your P button. The bracket buttons will make it smaller or bigger. It is, and it's simple, right? What I'm going to tell you is there are times where it's not smart enough to match the surroundings. So even though you might have gotten rid of the bird, the smartness of the tool isn't matching the surrounding area, so you can tell that you patched that area. That's where you go to Photoshop, and there's different ways of doing it here. And I'm going to show you. So right now, my feathering and everything, I'm going to keep the hardiness. I'm going to keep it pretty hardy, I guess you could say, for now. Sorry, I'm trying to think here. So the content aware, this is where Photoshop will say, okay, these are it's like a smart way of doing it. So it'll read the area around it and try to paint that in. So I'm going to make this a little smaller. And I'm just going to paint around this guy a little bit, like this. Let it process. And you can see it's gone. Now it's a little, I'm going to try to find one. Maybe we can do something up here. Let's see if this is different. So see right there, see how it matched? It looked around, and it's so smart that it can basically blend it in. And that's kind of what it's doing. Is it's not a spot removal. So what would be a spot removal would be, I think that's what a patch tool is, if I remember correctly. Let me see. See, I don't use this enough. I don't want to, so use pattern. So see this, yeah, this is for different, this is where I'm dumb when it comes to this stuff. In terms of using all of these, I'm still learning some of these. So again, I'm not going to do that. But in like Lightroom, it's just a spot removal, and it automatically will take you to a spot versus painting a spot in. So another way of doing it, if it's really difficult, let's go back here. Okay, so there's the bird. Go to Healing Brush. If you hit Alt, hold down Alt, you can sample the area. And this is key when you're doing, like, if there's a pattern. So when you do the removal and the filling it in, smartly doesn't work because you have lines and everything. That's where you grab this tool, the healing brush tool. Hold down Alt, find a spot, let's say right there, and then we can go in and we can, so see my marker, see the plus sign. It's giving me that pattern of the water to fill in. Move over a little bit. Move over a little bit. So see, it's filling in that area. And for this, you can see you have the line, 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 line. And I don't really like that. That's why I kind of like the content, because we didn't have the lines to deal with. We didn't have anything we were really truly matching. So we'll get rid of that. And I'll show you, though, the difference between this and the Smart Aware. If you hit Alt, let's say we go here, it's gonna go from where I'm at. So if I click on this bird and I go right, see, or left, see the plus sign, it's eventually gonna get back to the bird, and it's gonna bring the bird over here. So that's another interesting way of doing it, is I can Alt the bird, and let's say I want to do this. So now we have two birds. So see how it's painting the bird for me? And the shadow. And now I have three birds. So that's a cool way of doing it. But again, this version is better to do. Like, I remember I was doing a shot of trying to get rid of a tripod from my 360 camera, and I was on a deck, and there were all these lines moving, or these lines, and the Smart Aware is smart, and it got rid of the tripod, but the lines didn't match up. That's where you can use this tool to find a good spot of the lines, Alt click, and then spot in those lines. So let's say I wanted to do these waves, right? So see, I can put these waves in across the board. So that's where, if you have lines of like a deck or something, you can paint it in with that. So another reason to use Photoshop. No problem. Hey, and this broadcast is going to be on my Twitch channel. Check out this shot from when you come back, because this is another key version with, it's very simple layers. And I'll show you how I took two shots here to put into one. And that's a reason to use Photoshop that you cannot do in Lightroom. But thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate you. So with this rabbit hole you got me down is very interesting. So this was the Milky Way. And let me go to this is another perfect example of why you would use both. Let me find the shot. Computer's running a little slow. So here no, that's not the shot. Did it twice. 2 days in a row I did the Milky Way. So I originally did the Milky Way one night. One of the first nights we were there. Here. So the Milky Way looks great here. Let's see, my settings. ISO was 1600. I was wide open, 16 millimeters, as wide as I could go, as fast as my lens could go, 4-stop, and I was open 30 seconds. Manual focus on Jupiter here in the camera, which is actually pretty easy. It's actually not infinity. It was a little bit to the left of infinity. And you can see this is a version with no edits as soon as it pulls up. And this is the version with some edits. Actually, let's go to this one because it's about the same framing here. So no edit. I'm sorry, with edit, no edit. Actually, no, I did edit that. I'm so sorry. Let me reset this really quick just so you can see the difference. So that's no edit. So this is very important here. So this is the difference between a camera with a 2.8 aperture at its fastest and a 4-stop. So I didn't want to go too high on my ISO because I was trying to avoid noise. So right now I'm at a 2000 ISO. Anywhere from about 1600 to 35 for nighttime for sky shots is where you want to be. It just depends on how much noise you want to deal with. So I was at a 2000. I think I eventually, did I go up to 25? I think I stayed at 2000 for most of these. Yeah. No, I did go to 2500. And the key to this is the 25, because my 4-stop is a little slower, I lose some light. I lose some of these stars coming in. That's why your ISO has to go up. Versus if you're at a 2.8, you could get away with like a 2000 and preserve some of those. So the key difference here is, so this is 2500. I'm going to try to find one that's the same. 2000. Okay, so basically the same thing here. Basically the same exact shot. 2000, 16 millimeters, 4-stop, 30 seconds. So you can see the adjustments that I've made. I brought up the vibrance. The first thing I did was I brought up the saturated and vibrance, and I went in here to see what white balance looked good. And then you can dial back your vibrance to what you want. The clarity I have up to about 30. And then it's just about dialing in, and there's no hard and fast rule on how to do this. It's what you want your Milky Way to look like. So let's just go into this raw file, right? And we can go in here and we can see what we want to do. So one of the biggest things is your whites with Milky Way photos is it really can bring in a lot of the glow versus bringing up your exposure, right? Because you really only want your stars and your cosmic clouds to be illuminated. I don't want these blacks to come out. So that said, you can bring down your blacks a little bit, crush the blacks a little bit to really bring out the stars. You can bring up your highlights, get some more pop on the stars. And then here's your clarity. So your clarity, you can see really starts to see some detail in those cosmic clouds. I originally had it at 100, I believe, but I eventually dialed it back down because it was kind of giving me some, really amplifying some noise that I didn't want, even with my noise reduction. So I think I eventually brought it down. Here we'll keep it at 60, but you can see, so this was just auto white balance, and I didn't really want that. So here you can dial in your white balance, get it to, I like the purple hues a little bit. That's a little too much. But yeah, let's just keep it there for now. And then from there, you can put in your masking to see how much detail you really want in. I'm holding down the All button. So I want some of that cosmic clouds to be in detail, but I don't want everything to be in detail because you're going to pick up amplify some noise details. Right about there. Let's go with that. And then your 2000, usually about 15 to 25, depending. And then these two. And yeah, that's pretty simple. So I've gone down, this is another problem I have to start working on in my videos, is not to be a little more on track here. So going back to the Photoshop. So this shot is great. Okay, I timed this shot to be over the Gulf of Mexico. And you say, Chad, well, I don't see the Gulf of Mexico. Well, because it was dark. There's no moonlight. If there's moonlight, I wouldn't have been able to get this Milky Way in one shot. That's a story for another day. So what do you do here, right? So I got this shot the first night, and I was just so, I really wanted to just get the Milky Way. As I was doing it, I'm like, you know what? I can't see because there's no light, right? So the ocean is black in this. So you see it's black. And I can bring out the shadows. Like I could bring this up. Like let's go to a gradient because I don't want to touch any of the sky. So if you hit M, it'll bring up your gradient, and you can just do your bottom half of your photo. So let's say I don't want to soften the skin. Let's go to lighten, and let's go to exposure. And you can see I can bring up the ocean, but you can see, right? Like when you do that, what do you get here? You get, obviously I wouldn't keep it this bright, but I'm doing this on purpose. You get what? You get all that noise because and this is one of the key things I'm going to tell you is know what your contrast is when you do the shot, because black is black, white highlights are highlights, right? So I knew that these blacks were crushed. There's no saving those blacks at that point. Now there's situations where in a daytime and I can show this to you later, where let's say there's some shade and it's a bright sunny field where you can split the difference on your exposure, where you don't blow your blacks out, you don't blow your whites out, and you can kind of meet them in the middle with very minimal noise. But in this situation, this is just, these blacks are crushed. And I'm okay with that because that's what it looked like, okay? Now, the only downside of this is how great this shot looks. I was disappointed because obviously the whole point was to be over the ocean, okay? Now, I was going to get the shot I'm about to talk about this night, but I forgot the bug spray, and the mosquitoes and the no-see-ums were so bad that I only got, what is this, 8-9 shots, which for me is nothing, okay? So now let's go to the next night, because I'm like, okay, I came back, I edited these, I'm like, wow, this looks really good, but man, the whole point obviously is to get the Milky Way, but to show it over the ocean, because that's really cool. So I'm like, okay, I have to go back and I have to get a shot of the ocean exposed correctly, okay? Because there's no way that camera is going to be able to see that dynamic range of the ocean exposed and the sky exposed correctly. The only way to do that is to take 2 separate photos, and you need to layer them in Photoshop. And I'll show you how to do that. So, where are we at here? Okay, so we're clicking on this. So this was the original shot. Not the original shot. This is my Milky Way shot. And I was a little upset on this because my computer's being slow. It's not this noisy. I was a little upset at this because I had to come back and there were clouds. But it's still cool. It's still a cool looking shot. I actually think I end up using, which shot do I end up using? I think it's maybe this one. No, it's this one. I think I end up using this shot. Yeah, this is the shot that I use. Right? No. I'm sorry. This is the shot that I use. So it's this one. Okay. So trying to figure out which edit I did. Okay, so these are the 2 shots that I use. So obviously, exposed for the Milky Way, blacks are crushed. But I needed to get a shot. So my settings here were the same as earlier. But now I needed a shot of the ocean, and because I wanted to be able to see where we're at. So ISO 2000, 4-stop, wide open, 16 millimeters. But I opened my shutter 280 seconds, okay? Now, that ends up blurring out some of the stars because the longer your shutter is open, the Earth is moving, correct? So you're going to see, that's where you see those cool shots of like the stars in like a circle, right? like a spiral pattern. That's when you open up your camera's shutter using a remote shutter. I think I used my phone, so I didn't touch the camera because I didn't want any shake. But you can see what that does. But in turn, the ocean looks silky smooth because the waves are being smoothed out by the shutter speed. But now I can see some of that color. I can see where I'm at, right? So I think I just made some simple edits, some clarity, some vibrance. I went into my did I do gradient? No, I don't even think I did gradient. That shows you just with, actually, you know what? I even think I brought the exposure down a little bit. And the reason I did that was I wanted to match the sky. I remember putting this in Photoshop and noticing how they just, even though the ocean looked nice and exposed, they just didn't match. It was too bright. It felt too unnatural. So I went back in Lightroom and I brought the exposure down. So now I have two exposures of the scene. Go back here, and you can see I just have basically two layers. I have I have a masked layer, which I cut that out, masked it, and I at that point just feathered in with my brush this background. Let me see. I'm trying to see if I can show you guys. I don't want to undo all this. So you want to make sure you're at black. So we're on the layer mask. So you can see how you can brush in stuff. That's not what I wanted to do. No! Cancel. So you have two layers here. Pretty simple. I cut out this. I have your background here. This was my background. Okay? Then I brought in my other shot of the Milky Way. Okay? And then, if you can notice, with my background copy, I masked in just the water, and I did that with my brush. I'm wondering if I can just show you guys right now. Let's see if we can delete that. So we'll delete that. We'll go to, we'll go to layer mask. We'll hit that. Didn't want to double click. Make sure those are flipped. And then from here, it is not doing what I wanted to do. I don't remember. Oh. Okay, let's go back here before I get to. It deleted the whole stupid thing, which I didn't want. It's deleting the whole thing. So I think that I can delete layer mask. Okay, there we go. See, I'm still learning a lot to do with Photoshop. So here we are, right? So now we have, it's key to have the water below my sky, because I'm trying to mask that in. So with this top layer, you want to add a mask layer, and then from here I can paint in my bottom layer here of the ocean. And this takes a little bit of feathering up top to make the transition what you want it to be. You know, because I could just go straight across, right? But then you see you have like the skies lit up, and I don't want that. So you can come in here and get as close. You zoom in, you work on your feathering up here, your feathering options, your hardiness, and you basically just paint it in. So see, I'm being a little, trying to do it quickly so it's not painting in how I want it. But I mean, let's just go with that right there for now. So now you have the Milky Way over the ocean with just two simple layers in a layer mask. And you can see that it looks like a smooth transition. And that's basically it. And then, you just file and export. I did it here with these versions. I end up liking this sky a little better. But yeah, that's basically really easy. And again, there's so much you can do within this program. And I'm embarrassed to say that my knowledge is limited in Photoshop, and I'm trying to learn more, and I'd like to learn more. But that's where having both programs is very key, because you can take your simple edits within Lightroom and bring them into Photoshop if you need that done. So let's go back to. So I went down that rabbit hole. It was a little much, but I think it's very important to see that how strong Lightroom is, and that how well Lightroom and Photoshop can coexist together depending on your needs. So back to, with that said, I actually need to use the bathroom really quick. So we are going to pause. We're going to pause, and I'll be right back. So back. So with me obviously saying that even I am, let me take my headphones off, and my hair is going crazy. Even with me not knowing everything about Photoshop and learning, that should show you that just because you don't know how to use something doesn't mean you can't learn. There's plenty of between knowledge bases like what I can teach you, what other artists can teach you. There's so much information out there that you can get your hands on and learn these things. Again, between photography and cinematography, I'm still learning every single day. And there's no shame in realizing that you can't know everything, and the information you want to know, it's okay to realize that maybe this is why I can't be a live on-air host. You might want to know everything, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also nothing wrong with understanding that you don't know everything and that you can learn as much as you want because the information is all there for you. Between YouTube videos, Twitch streams, there's so many people willing to teach you the different techniques to help you creatively. And again, like I said, I can do a lot in Lightroom. I can do some in Photoshop. Still learning Photoshop. Same thing goes for cinematography. I've won 21 Emmys, and there's still things that I'm learning from many people, like the Philip Blooms in the world, or some of the cinematographers that I work with at NFL Films. So don't be ashamed to not know everything. I'm still a little embarrassed that I'm still learning Photoshop, but again, there's nothing wrong with it, and it's something that if you want to learn, dive in and do. So let's go back to, I gotta pull up because I'm on one screen. Woo! Oh, there. Okay, let's go to Lightroom, and let's go back to our shots of Grand Haven. So I kind of already went over this one. Simple edits. I got rid of one spot removal. I put a little bit of a preset on from there. I did some noise reduction. I did some masking of the details to only pick what I wanted, and that was it. So let's move on. And again, I chose this filter just because I liked how it looked, and honestly, that's one of my other biggest advices. Like, what does it look like to you, and does it look nice? Only you as an artist know what. Sorry for kicking the camera. Only you as an artist know what you want it to look like. And there's nothing, some people might like it, some people might not like it, but again, you're an artist, and that's how it goes. Sorry, my son wants a little more YouTube time. I'll give it to him. Hope that makes sense. Like, for example, this could have been, I could have looked at this and went black and white and said, wow, you know what, I really like that. I think it portrays a really artistic look that I would like. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's some people that might love this shot. There might be some people that don't, right? Just like I've told people that I love contrasty shots. And you can tell, and when you come into my gallery and online, that a lot of my stuff can be on the darker side with a lot of contrast. And, some people might not like that. Some people might not like it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's what you want as an artist. Let's go in here as my daughter. I took a few more shots. Let's go into this, and this is what I'm talking about earlier in the stream, was the fog. Like, you can't even see that there's another lighthouse in the distance over here. You could barely see this lighthouse. So here I was cutting out people, like I told you earlier. I didn't want to get randomly people walking, but I also really liked the lines of this catwalk going up to the lighthouse. So we'll go to the couple edits here that I did. This was a kind of a black and white edit, similar composition to this shot. And again, what's funny about this is I see this and I like it, but like I could sit here and keep fiddling with this shot as much as I want. There's so many different presets you could do. You could go in here and do whatever you want. So, I went black and white, but you can see I brought down exposure because I didn't want the whites too much, too bright. Brought down the highlights, the whites. I brought up the clarity to pop some stuff. Let's go to the next version, which should be similar shot. I think I might, yeah, so I got a little closer. But here, another example of your creative juices flowing. I think I sat on this photo tweaking for probably a half an hour. And it has nothing to do with the scene itself being bad. It's just like there's so many different cool ways within just Lightroom that you can manipulate simple things with your photo. And I'm not talking about doing any crazy Photoshop here. This is how simple it is, right? So I'm trying to think what I did on this photo. So let me go back to history here. So you can see, look at all these different things I was trying until I finally found something that I really, really liked. So you can see I brought the clarity up, vibrance up because I wanted the vibrance of the red, saturation up. I don't remember what I did, if I did any, so I didn't even do any history. Any brushing on this. This is just the overall settings for the photo. I didn't touch any of this. I think I originally did try to bring up the reds, but there was some bleed out here. Now you can get around that, and I'll show you later. You can brush in some of this color if you want. But for this, I didn't need to. I didn't want to. So here's another thing I haven't talked about yet, but it's split toning, and split toning is a very, very powerful tool. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this is with split toning. This is without split toning. So I found a white balance that I liked. I liked kind of this cooler look, but I wanted to be able to go in and adjust the highlight color a little bit. So see how I've put a little bit more of a bluish purple tint to the whites. And then I made my shadows a little warmer with the yellows. And I'll go in and show you really quick. So here are your adjustments. So here's my shadows here. So you can see, we'll go extremes here. Just so you can see what it does to the picture. Without it, with it a little, see how it warms it up just a little bit? See, but it's very fine, right? Depending on the photo. I think I had it right about there. Just a little bit of yellow coming in. And you're going to say, well, Chad, you're basically just counteracting the purple that you just put in the shot, the bluish purple. But that's that dance. That's that dance of, it's like if you're a painter, right? And you're putting strokes on, like, where are your colors going? What do you want it to look like? So yeah, I was really happy with that. Now let's go to, I want to go to the blue sky shots so I can show you a couple other things here. So now we're into no fog, blue skies. Now I could have very easily just done, so there is a little bit of a color shift here that I did, and I think I did, what did I do here? Between color temperature and, I'm trying to remember what one I did. It might have just been tint. I'm so sorry that, because I did this other day, and sometimes it's hard for me to remember exactly what I did. But I did, this is where I did paint in the red a little bit. So I hit K, and you can see, I'll just do my mask so you can see it. I painted in, come on, baby. I painted in some, you can see over there on the right, exposure. I pumped the clarity up. And that's all I did on that. I brought the exposure down, and I'll show you what that did to this and why I did it. So you can see with it, without it. With it, without it. So I really liked the exposure of this shot of the blues and everything, but the sun was just blaring down on this thing now. So I wanted to dial it back a little bit. So we'll go back here and we'll turn it on. You can see just a little bit of clarity. Makes it a little more rough looking, a little more contrast. You can see I love contrast. And that's basically it on here. I think I ended up doing... Did I do luminance in the sky? I brought up the blues a little bit in the sky, which is funny because normally I bring the blues down. But in this situation, and I'll show you the difference, without it, there was a little bit of vignetting. And it wasn't necessarily the lens, it was where the sun was hitting in terms of the sky and my perspective. So I'm like, I wanted this color to be a little more noticeable on the top edges. So I just brought up them a little bit, 30, and kind of evened it out. And just made for a really interesting red on blue backdrop. And I gave it kind of like a reddish turquoise kind of underlying look to make it look a little more, here it is right here, to make it look a little more, I don't want to say artistic because just it being itself is artistic enough. I just really like the color here. Computer is running a little slow. And this is another version, right? Another version of the lighthouse, the red on blue, composed for it on the left on purpose because I liked how it was just kind of sticking up. Rule of thirds. It's a known fact that when things are on the thirds, it's more visually appealing. And for here, it's the same deal. I think I just brought up the clarity, brought down the texture a little bit, and then I painted in via K. I painted in clarity and some contrast and some exposure. Now, you're going to say, well, why in your last one you had to bring the exposure down? Why did you bring it up for this one? It's because my settings were a little different on this shot. So let's see, this was... Let's see, were they different? They were not different, but I have a different perspective, right? I'm at a different angle, which there's more light coming in on this shot than this shot. So you can see, I'll go down and turn it off. Whoa, my computer's being slow. So that's without the painting on the lighthouse. That is with the painting on the lighthouse. So you can see I just wanted to pop it a little more, give it a little more texture, a little more contrast to really play off the blue sky. And it worked. What else we have? So let's go back to this black and white one. So another version. This was the blue sky, but this is, I fiddle around with a lot of stuff, and I'm like, you know what? Black and white, just with like the shine and all of this shadow contrast looked really, really cool. I'm trying to see if I did any of these. You can see this fog was just incredible. So another version here. This is a little more of a natural look. And you can see now, you see the difference between me tweaking the hues and the spot brush to doing not too much to this. So this one's turquoise and red. which was kind of bringing out the reds a little bit. All right, let's go to some ocean shots. Oh, so here's another, so before we move on to that, so this was a perfect example of what I was talking about. I couldn't control all these people walking around, and look, you can't expect that to happen. Hold on. Not sponsored by Bubbly, but I'm thirsty. So, like, this isn't a bad shot. I mean, it's not, no tweaks. I originally wanted, let's see if I got it. I originally wanted this shot with the sun going down, but at the time, I didn't know where exactly the sun was going to go compared to where I was at in this. And I ended up not liking this with the sun, these people here, and they were just enjoying the sunset, and that's completely fine. But I didn't like it. I don't want to see them. I didn't want to see them. So I did a few shots here, similar to earlier, but obviously cropping out. But now that we have the blue sky, everything's looking really cool in terms of the hues of the light blue, the blue, and the red. Just really nice colors. But you can see I'm not doing too much to this picture, right? Popping the clarity, bringing the vibrance up. I brought the highlights down to protect a little bit of the shine on the lighthouse, right? I did a little bit of split toning on my highlights, and I can show you what it looked like without it. See, it was a little on the, and this is completely fine. This is what I'm talking about artistically, right? Like I'm looking at this looks great. But when I was messing around with split tone, I did this, and I'm like, oh, I kind of like that. Give it a little more of a bluish purple, kind of really highlights those baby blues and that dark blue a little bit. So now, you knew I liked that shot of the sun setting, but I didn't want the people, and I didn't want to Photoshop the people out. So here's a shot which I think is fantastic. Beautiful. There's no banding, it's just my computer's loading. So this, I cropped out, and what you can't see is right about here are some heads of some people, right? But rule of thirds, this is on the third, right? You have this kind of going in the middle of the screen, taking your eyes to the lighthouse here, and emphasizing the vibrance of this shot, right? This is going to have contrast, and I'm fine with it. Now, you can see my histogram. I have room to bring these shadows up if I want without getting too much noise, okay? But I'm not going to do it because this was what the scene looked like, okay? I think I originally tried to dial in a little bit, but it just wasn't. It was taking away from all of this color, okay? And there's nothing wrong with going in and painting this in if we want to, but I really like the contrast to the vibrant sky and the layers of this sky here. So you can see clarity, vibrance, saturation. Brought up the shadows a little bit to get a little bit of the red, okay? Because I have a little bit of wiggle room here on my blacks. Brought the highlights down of the sky and the whites a little bit because we're getting a little bit of bleed out here. That helped with that. I think I did just a cloudy preset, which the white balance, you can go back and through it to get the actual color that you want. And I don't think I brought the luminance. I did bring the, see again, I brought the luminance up a little bit because I love this really transition part, right? I think without it, it was a little more, it wasn't as uniform as if I were to bring it up to 30. Let's go back. 40, and you can see there's kind of layers to it now, right? You have like this layer, you have this layer, and you have this layer. Just a layer of vibrance. In this situation, I didn't touch the split toning at all. I just masked in some detail, put in a little bit of noise reduction on the luminous and the color, and we're good. And again, we could go in here and we could bring up, we could dial in some here, some exposure. My computer's just being slow. So we could dial in this exposure a little bit if we want. And again, I'm being a little rough around the edges here. You really can dive in. And this is where you could go into Photoshop, you could mask this, and you could really do it even more specific. And obviously this is super dirty because I didn't zoom in or anything. But you can see, like, I can do this and I don't lose, because I had some wiggle room on my shadows. There's no noise in that shot. Now, with that said, it's not the most natural looking shot because this is not what it looked like. And some people might like that, and that's fine. But I liked this shot with just a little bit of shadows bringing up on the overall and keeping that contrast there. Simple edits. And now, like I said, I could have taken this into Photoshop and we could have done some layer and masking of this and trying to bring up in more exact brushes to get this where we wanted it to. But for me, that felt good and that was enough for me. So now we can go into these ocean shots. And these ocean shots are fun. I don't know if I'm lagged. Let's look. Did I lose some frames here? I did lose a couple frames. I don't know if I'm frozen or the stream's frozen. Okay. I might be lagging a little bit, but it is what it is. So let's go back into Lightroom and let's look at some of these ocean shots here. So I'm just going through. This is my process. This is what I do. Just looking at, so through my eyes, through the camera, there is some contrast here in this shot, right? So if I were to expose for that ocean on the left, that part on here on the left, this would have been blown out more than it is. If I would have brought this down more, then this would have been unrecoverable, too dark. Okay? So this is what I tell people is called split the difference. Find a good, when you have this much contrast, find a good in between. I really like that with the shell. Find a good in between, stick with it, and use that. So you can see with the ocean, right? Like, I took a lot of photos to try to see what kind of waves I could get. So we'll play with this one for a minute. So here we are. No edits. This is completely raw. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and I'm going to enable profile corrections. And sometimes you don't have to do this, but with the wide angle, actually I'm at 35 for this. Yeah, let's turn it on. Let's go with that. And again, this is all about kind of trial and error, trying to figure out what you think in your mind looks good. So first thing I'm going to do, this is my process. Daylight, cloudy. I'm just going to kind of get an idea of what these look like. Shade. Right, I really kind of like that orange look. But let's stay with daylight for a minute. Let's bring up the vibrance. I usually go to about 30. Let's bring up the saturation at about 15. Let's go right about there as a base. So now I'm kind of just looking at it, seeing what I like. Let's bring the clarity up to about 30. That's my normal. That's my normal clarity that I like to be at. It gives me a nice texture to the subject, but not overdoing it, because you can see I can overdo it, which artistically could look really cool, and I've done that before. But 30 is usually my base. This right here is usually the base. Sometimes I don't bring up the saturation, but this is normally where I start my edit. Now, you're going to be like, wow, there's a lot of contrast here, and you're right. So we're going to just do the simple ones first before we do any local adjustments inside the photo. So we'll bring up the shadows. Let's bring down the highlights and the whites a little bit. Right, there's nothing we can do about it. The sun is going to be hot. And you can see it is, but it's not bad. So we're still a little on the darker side. So I'm going to show you. We can go here to our gradient, flip it. You can adjust that later. Let's go to lighten and let's bring up the ground. Now, so the first thing I see is when I do this adjustment, I have an issue with the water here, right? That's way too bright. So there's lots of things you can do here. We can try turning it this way. My computer's freaking out. I want it the other way. So we can gradient it this way. Why do I have two here? Let's get rid of that one. Okay, let's turn it. And I have the mask on just so I can see where we're at, and then I can turn it off. I don't want it bleeding on the sun. Alright, so now let's turn off the mask so we can see it. So now, does that work? Does that work for anybody? So that's what I'm talking about, like seeing what it looks like. So obviously, no, this does not work. Okay. Now we can go back to here, and the next thing, this is about the process, right? So the next thing I would do is I would do this. Let's see what it looks like if we do this. Yeah. So see, we got a lot of light here, which isn't bad. So we could do this right here. This could be our shot. Not bad, a lot of contrast. We can go back in here. We can delete this. We can go into our brush, and we can brush in some light around the sun a little bit. You know, so we're hitting everything but the highlights. Now we go over here and we can mess around. Now see the difference there? So we're maintaining our highlights. You can see, well, Chad, you can see the around the sun. That's fine because we can paint it in a little bit. So you can see we painted it in, but we didn't do too much to it. It still maintains that, for the most part, that hot sun. But you can see the difference here is we've been able to maintain the highlights a lot in the water. We can go, so let's finish that. And again, I could do this and I could be like, you know what? Too much contrast, it doesn't work. You know, you can make all these adjustments and you can say to yourself, you know what, it doesn't do what I want it to do. You know, we can bring our blues up to help that corner a little bit. We also can come down to our manual lens correction and we can kind of take away some of that vignetting up top. So we're in a decent spot here. It's not my most favorite picture in the world, but you can see what we've done to it is we've been able to brush in through Lightroom some exposure to this shot to help the water. And again, this is very key here, right? Like I could have taken this photo and blown out the sun a little more to get the water where I want it to, but that's not how I do my photos. I want it to look as natural as I could get it and then make some adjustments. So we can go back up. Now that we have a lot done, we can come back up here and we can look at, you know, what does it look like when we bring in. So I like the cloudy, but it's a little too much. So I can dial back. I can find that. I told you, find that spot, right? And then you can tweak a little bit to there. So I'm even going down to 6. We can adjust the tint a little bit if we want, but I don't really want to there, and I'm going to show you why. Because now I can go into split toning. I can go to my highlights, and now we can start dialing in some different color here. And again, it's a lot of it's trial and error. Figure out what. So I like having that little bit of the blue in the highlights. And then we'll go to our shadows, and I usually put in a little. So here, so you could make it look a little more filmy, like there's a filter on it, and sometimes you could just keep it as is. Now this is a perfect example of doing something and then saying, you know what, I don't really like it. I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to do an overall tweak to my shot through this way of doing it. So yeah, I mean, I like that. Looks good. Not my most favorite shot in terms of dealing with the contrast, but you can see the process that you can go into. So here, obviously, a lot of contrast. I was trying not to blow out the sun and the sky. Took a few different versions of it. And this will be another example of, I really like this one a lot. A perfect example of finding that right, because sometimes you're going to, and again, it's not film, so you can take as many photos as your card will allow you. There's nothing wrong with that until you find what you really, really want. So you see I was trying to time up some waves. The worst is when so here, another example here is I said to myself, trying to see. I think I already messed with that one. Did that come through as a JPEG? Whoops. So that was I don't know why that was processed as a JPEG. That's weird. So I'm trying to find a wave. And this is just being, new phone, who dis? Hey, baby cakes. I kind of like these waves, to be honest with you. Kind of the crashing of the waves. And you're like, well, Chad, geez, oh, peas, this is really contrasty. And you're right. I had room on the highlights. Yeah, right. I did get a lot, but I did put SPF 50 on every single day. Hey, I was going to tell you a trick, by the way, Brandon. I was looking it up because I've been looking for a capture card to use my camera through, and they're all like sold out. It's so hard. Even the Elgato Cam Link 4K, which is what I kind of want, but you can't find it anywhere. So there's a workaround through Sony's remote app. Granted, it's not. I think there's some delay possibly to it. It's not quite as crisp, but it's free as well, and it works. So I did order, Brandon, a microphone. I'm supposed to go pick it up at Best Buy. Yeah, there is a little bit of a delay, but thank you. But in the meantime, before I can get it, at least this is a workaround. And I did buy a new mic, so I don't have to do this shit anymore. So anyways, you guys are going to be like, wow, there's so much contrast. And again, you're right. I probably could have exposed a little more for the sky. But again, we have some leeway with this. So let's go to our gradient. Let's flip it. You can see already just with a little bit of exposure added. So obviously you can see it's hitting the sun, and I'm not going to have that happen. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. But you can see a little bit exposure goes a long way. Let's just go there and see what happens. Let's just do it. Let's come down here. Let's bring up. So that's starting to look really good. Okay? We can bring up, let's do our global adjustments like I normally do. Let's bring up our clarity a little bit. Whew, I love this. So I think what you're seeing here, and I saw it real time, is the Sahara Desert. I don't know if you guys knew, blew over the ocean, a huge dust cloud. And it was into the Caribbean, into the Gulf, and Florida was getting hit by it. And I think that's what you're seeing, a lot of haze in some of these first few days is from that. It's also another reason why they didn't have a lot of rain. I think it didn't rain until the last day we were there. So we were there for 8 days, and in the Florida heat and the Florida sun, it never rained. It was pretty amazing. But that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing a lot of vibrant colors, seeing a lot of these wispy clouds that really look cool. So here, we can bring up the shadows a little bit. And I know, it did rain a little bit on the mainland, but where we're at, it did not rain until the last day. And boy, when it rained, but we got really, really lucky. So now, going back to the original shot, I told you, well, you're probably saying to yourself, Chad, that's a lot of contrast. But if you looked at my histogram, my blacks were still preserved, so I had room to bring them up some. Right? There's a little noise in there, but not enough to cause any concern. Let's go back in here. I want to see, now that we've done some bring this down a little bit. Now that we've done some shadow adjustments, we're going to bring that down a little bit. And again, we can bring, I technically could bring these, I technically could bring these shadows up even more. You can see, I have these shadows all the way up. And with these sensors on these cameras, look at that. There's barely any noise in this shot, and that shadow is 100, and this is one shot, one frame. Pretty impressive. Now, granted, I'm at 100 ISO, but still, from where this picture was, which is something like this, to that, and I can hear it now. Well, you said that you shoot naturally, and it looks like you made this, edit to make it look like not what your picture looked like. And I want to pump the brakes on that and realize that our cameras, how great this camera is that I'm looking at right now, that took this photo, it's not as good as these. So what you see on the screen right now is more of what I saw than what I saw compared to what the camera saw in this shot. Okay? It's just dynamic range. So, yes, I don't like to do too much, but you can see I'm not adding anything other than just bringing up exposure. The other way to do it would be to bracket your photos and to merge them, which I do. That's how I do my real estate photography, but you can't do that in this situation because the waves. You wouldn't be able to match it up. They wouldn't align. It would just wouldn't work. It would be a nightmare. So, like I've told you, is compose your shot. Find that middle, if there's that much contrast, find that middle ground where you're saving one or the other or both ends of the histogram where you can, and that's another reason why you want to shoot raw, because you can make those adjustments. And that's very key, especially if you're not able to plan things out and figure out when the exact perfect time to come to get all that lighting. But I'll be honest with you, looking at this shot, the only other way I could have done it was I could have exposed for the highlights a little more, and I would have been okay? But in reality, this is the contrast of the scene. It's just like when I did the Milky Way shot, and I showed you that earlier in the stream. Like, the Milky Way looks great, but there's no light hitting the ocean at that point. So if I want to see it, I have to expose for it and blend it. In this situation, this is what I had to work with. At the end of the day, you can see, yes, like I told you, I could have exposed more for the highlights a little bit and gotten away and brightened this up a little bit, but you can see that the camera's showing you where that line is, where the sun, because the sun is so low, where it's hitting it. Now, if the sun would have been right here, this shot is different. More of that light is spilling on the ocean. But in this situation, this is when we got there. This is what I had to deal with. And that's what you can do with these cameras and shooting in RAW. It's pretty incredible what you can do without going too crazy in post. Right? You can see I'm at f11. My sensor was a little dirty, so I'm going to go through the spot removal, and we can get rid of some of these dust particles on this camera that I swear I just cleaned, but this is because I'm at an f11. And why am I at an f11? You ask. I'm hoping that if you're watching this, you know why. Because I wanted the depth of this. I wanted a lot of depth in this shot. I could have gone F4, been on these waves, but then all of this is going to be blurred out. Now, could you see it if it's just on this? No, you'd have to zoom in to see it's blurred out. But you can see with F11, you can see that a lot of this stuff is in focus, or pretty darn close. So now we can do some final adjustments to this photo. We can go in and look at our white balance. You know, do we want it a little more blue? Do you want it a little more orange? And I know somebody that likes orange, so I tend to go on the orange side because it does look better. Some of these shots. I'm going to bring it down though a little bit. So another thing we're going to do is and this is about trial and error too. I'm not sure if I like there's a little fall off on the water out there. Let's see what that does. Does that help it out a little bit? It does. Yeah. I think it's raining. Yeah, it's a little better. So all I did was I brought the exposure a little bit into the sky just to help this area. This area was a little dark. Now we can come over here and start really messing around. So see, I can bring the blues up if I want, down. I really like that color though. Really like seeing that blue pop. That cloud, I love that cloud right there. It's so cool. We could even bring, what is the saturation? We can even bring saturation up. So you can see the extremes, right? You wouldn't want to do that. But I could even bring it up to like 15%. Really get some cool layers of clouds going. So you can see the local adjustments that you can make here to the extremes, which I'm just showing you for those purposes. So that's kind of cool. See how I bring that orange up a little bit and it hits a little bit of the clouds there? Watch. Bring them up. Let's go extreme. But you can see the extreme. And just dial it back a little bit. Let's go 20. Let's turn it off. Let's see what it did. So very slight, but can make a difference. So now we're going to go in here, and I'm going to get rid of some of these people. Brandon, we need to get on some Overwatch. So what I'm going to do, I might have to do this in Photoshop, but I'm going to completely get rid of this. But Chad, you said you like to keep it natural. You're right, but I also don't want to see these people. So you can see we can kind of put that line where it needs to be. We're going to, once I get it there eventually. So this is where I'm talking about at 2:30. Okay, that sounds good after that. So you can see, like, unless you zoom in, you're not going to see it, but that's going to bother me. So I'm going to show you that trick that we do, but we're going to wait until we're done with all the adjustments. But we're going to take it to Photoshop, and I'll show you, in this situation, why you would use Photoshop instead. So for a minute, let's just make sure we're happy with what we got here. Didn't want to do that. Dehaze is very powerful and looking cool, but it's, see, this is where it's like I get in the rabbit hole because I like a lot of contrast. So I'm like, wow, yeah, well, it's looking really cool. But then my wife would be like, yeah, it's a little dark. Everything you have is dark. Brighten some stuff up, which I do agree with her. So I'm going to bring the shadows down a little bit now that I've shown you how that works. We're going to bring, actually what we're going to do is we're going to make that stay there so we can see. We're going to bring the exposure up a little bit. And then we're going to counter that with bringing down the shadows a little bit. And we're going to sit back and we're going to look at that shot and see if we like that. So the question is, what did I do? Well, I'm going to get rid of these birds in the distance. They just look like little specks. I'm combating when you bring up the shadows, you're going to get more noise versus bringing up a little of exposure across the whole thing. So I'm kind of counteracting and finding a middle ground to where I'm happy with how the scene looks with minimal noise. Bring up some noise. We're going to mask this. Hold down Alt. And you can see what's getting detail and what's not getting detail. I'm sorry, not detail, sharpening. I usually go right about there. Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm pretty happy with that shot. Not too much post-processing. We can go into split toning. And we can see if this gives us anything. See how it kind of pops the blues a little bit, but we get rid of some of that orange. I don't think I'm going to do any split tone. Ooh, I like that a lot. I like that red. This is about the artistic version process. It's a little green. We can dial in a little bit of split toning there. I actually kind of like that. Kind of gets rid of the yellow though, so I'm not sure if I want to sacrifice that. I kind of like that. Let's go there, and then let's look to see what we can do. Maybe we can put a little blue on the shadows. Too much purple. Too yellow. Too green. But just see a little bit. See, just a tiny bit. Let's go there. All right, so the difference. Which one do I like better? Off, on. I think I like on. But just that tiny bit, that tiny bit. Okay, so now let's do this really quick. Let's make sure. Sometimes I go auto, sometimes I don't. Okay, so now let's go to Photoshop. Edit in Photoshop. This might take a quick minute. You want to see it again? Well, I've already passed that. Sorry. So these are the times where I bring stuff into Photoshop. I like that little teddy bear shot. See, like I wouldn't do this. I mean, I'm not saying this is bad, but like this artwork is not what I do. Dude, Whatever. Whatever. I was reading it. My computer's being slow because I got a lot going on. Not sponsored by Bubbly, but I love them. Okay, so now I'm not even going to do any layers. I'm not going to do any masking or anything. We're going to zoom in. This is just simple, but their healing brush is much better in these situations. So now I'm going to go to my healing brush. We're going to go spot healing. We're going to do content aware. We're going to hit the bracket button. So now it's going to try to match this area, and you can just do that. Gone. What I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to, just to see how smart this is, I'm going to see if I do this, if it'll match it. Gone. Look at that. Done. But Chad, you don't do that to your photos. I just did. But you can see why you would do that, right? Like, I don't want people there. Sorry. They're great. They're awesome. But they're having a good time, but I don't want them there. So yeah, that's basically it. And that photo is done. It looks beautiful. It looks nice. I go here. I'm going to export it out. If my computer will do it. I mean, and Brandon, that's why I was talking to somebody in chat earlier. They're asking why, like, when would I use Photoshop? So I use Photoshop on that blending of the two photos, the layer masking of the Milky Way. But when, like, the perfect situation for me is when I have something I need to get rid of. It's minimal, right? Because I normally don't do that too much, but where Lightroom isn't smart enough, it's easier to go through Photoshop because their healing tool is so powerful. So powerful. And it is much better, but Lightroom does a decent job when you're doing very minimal stuff. And I was showing earlier, I wish I'd had to dig it up. There's been times where the other brush where you want to not content aware, but you do the spot. So let's say you have a lot of lines that you're working with, and although the content aware healing brush is really good, it's not that smart where it's going to completely match. So that's where I said holding down Alt, finding that spot, and putting in those lines where you need to is perfect. Now, I could have done that on here, but I was very curious to see if it would be able to kind of clean that up without me basically patching it with another shot. And it did. I was actually pretty impressed. Yeah, and again, you weren't in here. That's where I'm like embarrassed that I don't know as much about Photoshop as I do Lightroom. But there's nothing wrong with that. There's so much out there that you can learn, and you just keep learning. So I almost need you to do a class on Photoshop for me so I can learn more. But it's about time, and you know that. It's about dedicating the time and really mastering it. I mean, there are enough resources out there. I could sit down and I could learn everything within this program. And so what I'm doing with Photoshop is I'm learning as I go. Like if I need to know something, I go learn it, and then I do it. So yeah, that's the final product. Obviously, this isn't the final product, but that was the final product. Now let's go to another day here. I'm going to try another day. Actually, these are the shots I wanted to look at earlier. And I'll look at them with you. I tell you, Streamlabs is a hog, man. The longer I've been on, the more it's been hogging. So this is where, like, I saw the shot, and I'm like, man, that looks sweet. I come in and I edit it, and I'm like, I like it, but I feel like I need to walk away from it to figure out if I think it's worth its weight. Right? So here I brought up clarity. Here I brought up the exposure on the water. So like it's nice, but it's just not doing it for me. Again, not every shot is going to be something that is a masterpiece. I mean, it's nice. I like the color. I mean, what if we come in here and we mess around a little bit? It's just kind of flat to me. I mean, the color is really nice, but the overall image is just flat. So that's where I would just chalk it up to, like, it's nice, but it just didn't come across like I wanted it to. So you just move on and see what else there is. So this is a little more dynamic because you have the, man, I exposed that. I would slap myself and tell me that, why did you expose that so dark? Because I would argue that we're only human. It did need pop. But again, that's what I'm saying. Like, it just, like, looking at the picture, the colors are beautiful, but there's not enough contrast and texture to the shot. It's just very flat overall. That's where you could try to dial in some, see, now we're getting somewhere. Right? Bring in some clarity. You know, we could go over to these presets and kind of look to see if there's anything that makes it more interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the clarity looks nice, but it just still, something about it that just doesn't do it for me. It's just flat. If the sun was here and there was some more shadows, I would like it more. It's kind of the same thing with this shot. So this is where, obviously, this is where local adjustments are important, right? So I just brought up the exposure, and it kind of takes away from the sky. So instead, I also don't like that wave right there. Let's see what that one does. Do your little gradient adjustment. Obviously, it's too high, but we'll dial it in now. Bring that baby down. Let's make it a little more. Somebody better answer that damn phone. So Brandon, did you not know that you could do all this stuff in Lightroom? I prefer, when I'm doing photos, I prefer Lightroom with all my adjustments. I know that you can do most of this in Photoshop, but I'm just so used to doing all these local adjustments through Lightroom. So we're getting somewhere. So see, now the difference with this, and this is how crazy like perspective and adding texture and detail can help. This is a much more dynamic shot. I'm still not happy with the sky yet, but you can see the difference just by doing a little bit of, just adding these waves right here makes such a difference. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, you can just watch my videos, man, and I can teach you. It's honestly, if you can do Photoshop, Lightroom's a breeze. It's just knowing like the more advanced things in Lightroom would be like the gradient tool, the brush tool, um, and stuff like that. And then maybe working with hues and stuff like that. But overall, like if you can use Photoshop, you'd be fine in Lightroom. You just got to learn the little hotkeys, which are really easy to do. So we're getting somewhere with this. What was it shot at? 8K 10. What is... Let's go to 78. So it's still a little... Brighten it up a little bit. And then let's go into here because I don't know... What is causing that? I think it's this one. That's better. So you can see we have a little grain. And why do we have more grain? Because it's dark. This was a darker shot. I'm at 1600 ISO. And that's where the difference between the shot earlier and the shot now. The shot earlier, I was at 100 ISO and I had the same wiggle room and I was able to bring those shadows up with minimal shadow or minimal grain. You bring that ISO up, even with these cameras, right? Now, if I weren't bringing up those shadows, it would be okay, but it's because I'm bringing up those shadows. Let's see if we bring up the clarity a little bit. See, now we're starting to get... This is a little more than I would normally do. I shouldn't say normally do. This is more than I normally want to do. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do. So that's an example where that's going to work. I don't even have to think about it. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know if I like... What I might do is what I did earlier. I might split the difference here on this. Hello? Bring this down a little bit. And then we're going to go into here. And we're going to bring the shadows up a little bit. That should help with our... Yeah, that helped with our... So there, instead of doing one extreme, I split it in half. And that helps the exposure on the darker spots of the image. Now, this might be important going into highlights. Let's see what we can do. Because it's nice, but there's a little bit of too much of a purple. Let's go into shadows really quick. There's a little too much purple in it. It's not bad. So purple we'd want to counteract with green. So you can see the water, right? So without it, the sand and the water is got a little bit of a purple hue. If we bring in a little bit of green, well, a lot of green, you can see it. Do the same thing with yellow, just depending on the shade you want it. You bring in a little green, it helps counteract a little bit of that purple. I don't want to do too much, just enough. And let's go into highlights and see what we can do on the highlights. I don't want to lose... We might not do anything with the highlights, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to touch the highlights. I think I'm going to keep it there. My son wants more YouTube time. One second. My wife came by. She didn't even come in to see me. Huh? She said she came by, the door was shut, she heard me talking, and she didn't want to interrupt. Wow. Wow. Okay. So yeah, I mean, this looks pretty good. I mean, I feel like even with the water, it still feels a little dark and a little kind of flat, to be honest with you. So maybe we'll bring the clarity up a little more. Just to get a little more texture. Now it's going to bring out some more noise. And this is where we're going to have to just see if we're okay with it. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, it's not my most favorite shot in the world, but I do like that sky. The sky is so pretty. We're going to keep it and we're going to move on. Let's look at these shots. I don't remember. So obviously that's way too dark. So here, this is what I was talking about in terms of the contrast, right? So I can't save these. I don't want to bring these up because you're going to get, look at all this noise you're going to get in here. It's hard to tell from this, but it's there, okay? It's pretty incredible, though, that I can still bring some of that up. But let's try to keep it as close to the exposure that I saw. This is where the presets can be kind of cool. Let's come in here, bring up the vibrance, bring up the satch a little bit, clarity up a little bit. Ooh, I like that a lot. Look at the water. So what we can do is, I like the clarity, but it might be a little too much around the trees. So what we can do is we can paint in some clarity on the water right here. Just enough to get it to start popping a little bit. Maybe bring up the exposure of it a little bit. So again, this is how I exposed it for a specific reason. I don't want to go crazy and be like, oh, I need to bring, well, not that. Oh, I need to bring up the shadows because I really want to see the green. Well, it's too late for that, right? You can, but I'm going to zoom in and you're going to see the noise. Look at all that noise. So we're going to go back. We're going to keep this I like that in between of daylight. I like that in between of cloudy. So that's looking kind of cool. I mean, it's a lot of contrast and it's dark, but I think it's dynamic. I think it looks good. I don't like you, how you just did that, bucko. But it's interesting. So I want it a little brighter. It's too bright. I like the water. I like how it's looking there. Dust spot. I gotta clean my lens again, it looks like. Yeah, it's cool, but this is, Brandon, this is where I go back to, like, I like these shots a lot, but I just don't know how much other people like them. Do you know what I mean? In terms of, like, would somebody print this? I don't know. I mean, I love it. I like the contrast, but I'll show you the difference. I have another shot. Oh, by the way, you can't see it. There was a manatee right here. I'll show you another shot. Similar angle, but a different. Manatees are, they're the cows of the sea. All right, so let me show you. So there's this angle, but then, or there's that shot, but this is where light, like this is a little later in the day. I'm going to show you another version. Well, here's the same angle, but a different part of the day, obviously. So I was trucked to the right a little bit, which this is already edited, but again, not much done here, right? Like I dropped the blues down to deepen them a little bit, brought the clarity, the vibrance, the shadows, the whites down, just to help on the blue sky. I don't know if you're asking, but why vibrance over saturation? Because vibrance pops colors it's a little more subtle versus saturation. And especially if you're doing like portraits and you are outside, the vibrance will affect the landscape or the outside part versus the human tone. Unless you go, like if you go 100, then it's going to start bleeding in. But vibrance is a very key tool in my editing because it brings up the colors without oversaturating them. I think that's how I want to word it. So there's that version, but let me go back to, I wanted to find that shot I did one when the sun was setting. I have so many beach shots to go through. So many beach shots. Here, right here. I haven't even touched these. I guess I have to make it bigger. Oh. So this is what I was talking about here. So same spot, just a different time, a little bit earlier, so there's more color in the sky. This is closer to twilight versus we were on the beginning of twilight here. The other shot, we were kind of at the tail end. That's why you lost a lot of this color. And this is why a lot of times I tell people that, they're like, we're here to see the sunset. And the sunset is beautiful, but some of the best skies are twilight. And sunrise, before the sun rises, probably about a half an hour before to sunrise, and then after sunset for about a half an hour. That beautiful twilight color is really key, and you can see we were losing it while we were even there. I also exposed. So I think it's because I moved and I exposed a little bit. I wanted a little more straight down. So that is kind of what I was thinking right there. Right down the middle. And you can see I exposed a couple different ways because I wanted to see in post which one was better. So these are all pretty. Probably go with the one that's a little more exposed and see what we can do. So I always do my first couple things just to get an idea of where we're at. And then from there, I'm not talking because I'm concentrating. So the trouble, I want to do this, but the trouble, we might get some grain inside those where I'm bringing that clarity in, which we can counteract, but And then I might paint, let's do a new one just in case. I might paint a little more clarity in the sky. You can see I have dust. Do that again. So I'm doing an extreme here. I just want to see what it looks like. It might be too much. I don't want to hit the trees. 100 is a lot. Bring the exposure up a little bit. I don't want to go too much though. Let's bring this down to like 50. Stop, 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 stop. So we're getting somewhere. I'm going to get rid of that dust mark. F11. Clarity, you're going to see it. I got to clean this lens. How many times am I going to say that I need to clean this lens? Or not the lens, excuse me, the sensor. So we're getting somewhere here. So you can see just how much split toning can make a difference artistically on your shot. So like, hey, I know Brandon likes warmer, oranger type shots, right? So I could dial in a little bit of yellow into the highlights, or I can go a little more blue or purple. So again, you can do a lot of cool, like art if like your style is to do something different, right? You can really have fun with within Lightroom itself without even going to Photoshop. You can do a lot of local things and be happy with it. And that's, again, I'm not saying to use Lightroom or Photoshop or I'm not saying to use one over the other. What I'm saying is I think they're best used in tandem. So right now I'm just kind of moving around just to see where I want this. I almost think I want to keep the shadows as is. I don't know, what does this look like? So let's do that, and then let's bring, just for giggles, I like saying just for giggles, let's bring up saturation a little bit. Add some more noise. I don't want to do that. I actually might bring the blues down to about 30. Not noise. I have, dude, this dust. I don't know what happened. Looks like a little spaceship. I don't know what happened to my, maybe some sand. Makes sense since I was on the beach. I have not. No. Yeah, UFOs. I have not. Um, and I think that's one of the hardest things to do, Brandon, is I think dealing with the color, because the color can completely change how a shot feels to somebody. You know what I mean? Completely can change. Like, look, just on the, I've done some, obviously I've done a little bit of adjustment to the oranges, but just the white balance alone, like, look how much this can change the feeling of the shot. Obviously I wouldn't do tungsten, but you get where I'm going with this, right? Like, there's, like, whereas you, Brandon, might really like that right there, somebody else might like a little cooler or even an in between. So that's why it's like, unless I'm like, hey, Brandon, I'm going to get this shot for you. I know you like this. This is for you. I'm going to make it like, unless it's a commission specific piece, you just make it how you as an artist want it to look like and then go from there. Now, with that said, I could do this version of this photo and Brandon could message me and say, hey, I really like that photo. Any way you can make it more orange, or can you warm it up a little bit, is how you would call it in the video world term. I'll look at that. I'll look at it. Are there presets? What is it? Let me look at it now. I don't have two screens here at the studio. Oh, yeah, that's cool. But see, that's Brandon, geez, OPs, $11,000? But see, that's a specific style, and there's nothing wrong with that. It looks awesome. But it's very saturated. Very saturated. Oh, that's a... What is it? Is he a painter? That's not a painting, is it? No, it's a photo. Man, you don't salivate over my gallery. Yeah, so that's a style, right? Like, we could go through and we could start doing any of that. Now, granted, that's a specific shot that really goes through, but like, we can really this is a little harder because it's so dark. But we could go through and we could do that to some of these shots. I want to go back to this before I forget. Yeah, 11K, dude, I can't even sell a photo for $200, let alone 11 frickin' grand. So this is a cool shot. I mean, a lot of cool twilight here. There's lots of things you can do. Like, even like, even like putting a little bit of like a lift shadows on looks kind of cool. Darkens it. You're gonna keep showing me these shots, aren't you? Yeah, that's cool. But that's cool. Don't get me wrong. But that's a specific style, and not everybody's gonna like it. But again, we could go. You're done. Don't be done. But that's where you can go. Like, I can go through and we can do different stuff here with all this if we want, but I don't want to. No, I'm sorry. I'm in the dark about him. I didn't know he existed. But see, that's a style thing, Brandon, and that's great that he does that. But you know, that's something where you make that your style, and he does a really good job with it. 100%. Honda. What I'm trying to figure out is if I'm trying to find that nice balance between, God, I feel like that sky is a little too bright. There we go, it's a little better. Sometimes I do that just to see the extreme. You know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to see what it looks like if I pop some contrast. Give it a little texture. So yeah, I mean, this is just about done. For me, at least. I feel pretty happy about it. I think it looks good. But here's another key to this whole thing is I was able to put this on a tripod, keep my ISO at 100, and my shutter is open. F11, 1/5 of a second. So I'm able to, like, if I wanted to bring up more shadows, we could without seeing too much grain. Right? I mean, you see what we can do now. Like, there's lots of things we can do with this photo. Bring out the greens. And see, there's barely any noise in any of this shot because my ISO is so low. But now that I'm looking at it, I'm almost liking the green a little bit in this shot. It's not as, it's different at least. Because I'm not seeing a ton of noise. I mean, I think that looks good. I love the purple hues that I'm getting with the adjustments I've made. So you have the nice yellow into the purple. The sky's a little bright, but I'm almost okay with it. Normally I would kind of want to dial it down, but I think it gives a good balance. I think it gives a good balance. I'm going to sit back and kind of get my eyes on that and see what I think. You know, we could let's see if we dial in. I don't think I could, but I like it more. I like that you were able to bring some greens out. You know, I do too. I think it does make a difference. That's not what I wanted to do. What is going on right now? My computer's freaking out. It's a little too much. I might have to do a different brush. Alright, let's do a different brush. Let's do new. Let's do dodge. Let's lighten these trees up a little bit. So I don't think I like it. I don't think I like that brush. I think I like it like just like that instead. It's very subtle. A very subtle. Subtle on the greens. I do love the dehaze tool. It's so strong. It's almost too strong at times. So we have a little bit in the greens. Brought the greens up. We can't bring the yellows up. We can see what the saturation looks like, but it might be too much. Maybe not. I didn't want to do that. Not sponsored by Bubbly, but having a Bubbly. I mean, I feel like I'm getting somewhere with this shot. I mean, again, it's something like this. It's more than I normally would do. But again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like I'm adding anything in post other than just light from the actual shot. It's tough because I'm trying to. I need to look away from it and go back to it. But see, that's the power of these cameras and shooting at 100 ISO because of what you can do here. So for giggles, what does it do if we do that? That's too much. I don't know. I kind of don't want to touch it anymore. I'm kind of happy with it. It's different. I think I might leave it as is. Yeah, it looks good. I like it. I'm trying to find another shot that I can work on before I wrap up for now. Well, and that's why I picked this angle, and I knew this was going to happen. I wanted that your eyes to go down the water, leading you into this area. But you can see the difference. There's that, and then the difference between that other shot, which was good in its own right, but it's just completely different. Oh, I went too far. Come back to me. This one. Computer, I'm gonna punch you in the face. That one. It's just a completely different shot because of the time of day. I'm going back. I'm going back. Streamlabs is just hogging this computer right now. See, now looking back at this, I wish I would have maybe bracketed this shot 3 times, like a 3 bracket, and then because the clouds weren't moving that much. If she approves, then I know it's good. But if I would have bracketed this shot, I would have had even more room in these shadows to bring out more detail. Is that a bird? I think that was a bird. My computer's really bogging down. Thanks, dude. Yeah, I like it. I think it looks good. I might need to wrap up, though, if we're going to play later. I'm going to have to get home and get ready. Oh, these were cool. I was wondering what these look like. Oh, I love that, like, almost curve of that wave there. UFO. UFO's in the water. I really like that a lot. I love that curve. See that curve right there? That's cool. It's tough. I feel like I took too many of the ocean, but it's like that's what I mean, we were there. I took that one. That one's cool. I love the layers there. I almost want to mess with that one more. This one. Now that I see it. So here, I just did the gradient on the water, I believe. Yeah. To brighten up the water. And then I brought up clarity, vibrance, brought up some shadows, took down some highlights. I think I purposely made it this temperature for a certain somebody that I know that likes orange. But I don't think I went all the way through because there's a lot more I can do here. A lot of tweaking. It's like you're at this point when you're dealing with a raw file, it's like you're painting. Because again, my eyes, obviously maybe not the clarity, but my eyes more saw this versus without any adjustments. It's just these cameras, how great they are, they don't have the dynamic range of our brains. Yeah, they did. Again, I think that's that dust cloud. It was the last night was the only night that we had issues with. But at that point, I already gotten like 5 sunsets, so I'm just like, I'm not gonna get too upset over it. Hmm. Hmm. I like that. It's pretty close. Pretty close to what I like. What I'm looking at. I really like that curve. I think I might edit this one really quick. I really like that curve of that water. I think it looks really cool. Ugh, I got a lot of room here on this one. I just don't know. On these shots, the blue's got a little warm. Cool them off a little bit. Whew. There's a lot of saturation there. That's not what I wanted to do. I really like this right here. I really like that a lot. This was kind of cool. I had like got splashed, so there was a little bit of like a filter flare on it. There was a spot on the lens. It's kind of cool. It's got like a almost like a film. It might be too much, but it could be something artistic here. I'm trying to play around with. So basically, I went low to get a wave shot, and I got splashed while I was taking a couple shots, which in turn put a water spot on my lens, which then is causing this like film type filter on it, which I'm kind of digging a little bit here. It's different. But I'm trying to figure out if there's a good way to use it to my advantage here. This could be really cool. Unintentional. Thanks, dude. Yeah, I mean this is what I love doing. I love doing this a lot. And I'm hoping that some people can learn and know that you don't have to do too much to your photos. It's not a hard process. I kind of like the daylight, to be honest with you. I like that little bit. Let's warm it up a little bit. You can see a lot of it's just trial and error. Like I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm just trying some things here and there to see how they work. kind of got that like cool, like almost like there's a filter on it, like a film filter. I know I keep saying it, but I kind of like it. It's different. Some of you can tell that I like the different separations of color. Like I could do this and everything's kind of the same, but I think that's too flat. I like having a little bit of separation between subjects, the sky. See, I think this is starting to take. I don't know if I like this. This might take away from what I might do is I might do this. Let's see if this works. Do a gradient and then let's cool off. Okay, that's too much. Hello. Let's cool off the water a little bit. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I can show you the difference. Might be a little too much. I want it subtle. I don't want it too. I don't want anything. Let's go like 10. Just to give it a little bit of, see, just a tiny bit there. Watch. It's good, but give it a little separation so you still maintain that glow. It's different, but I think I like it. It's different, but I like it. We could even pop the saturation. I actually think I might do that on this one. Pop the saturation up. Yeah, I kind of like that. It's kind of cool. It's different. $238. How long has the stream been going on for? Almost 3 hours. It's a pretty good one. Pretty good stream. See, like this one might be cool. I mean, it's a lot, but it could be cool if we. What if we do. What if we bring the dehaze it a little bit, and let's play to the fact that that's got that water spot on it, and try to make it look. I almost kind of like the tilted. You can tell I'm thinking when I'm moving my beard around. This is interesting. No. It's definitely different. It's missing something. I'm trying to figure that out. I liked that. I don't know what it was. Where was I at? So I'm just trial and error, trying to see what I like here in terms of the shadows. I'm trying to play off of like the vintage type of look without going too extreme. I think this is at 150. Let's bring the highlights down a little bit. It's different. I like that. It's cool. It's very I almost like the tilted version. It's almost like you're in the water. It's definitely different, but I'm digging it. Okay. I think I'm going to end on that one. I am going to export off stream. I'm going to export these out that we edited, and then I'm going to post them. But I think that was good. About 3 hours of nothing but editing for the most part, except for a quick bathroom break and my bubblies, which I love. I'm not sponsored by though. And hopefully, me and a certain person will be on later or tomorrow, depends, and we'll do some Overwatch. But no, I think some of these are really cool. I'm happy with them. Definitely a lot of cool shots. A lot of cool shots. All right. Well, with that said, let me see if I can remember my buttons. 5, full screen. Yeah, the shot doesn't look bad, considering this is not through a cam link, and this is just through the remote of the Sony. It looks pretty decent. And it saved me $150 to $200 just doing this. Not bad. The next time I stream, I will have the new microphone, which would be nice. I'm looking forward to that. So, all right. Thank you so much, Brandon, and anybody else that might watch this. Appreciate you guys. We'll do more, and I will be posting this later.